We're learning the third Sikha of Parshas Terumah and Chelek Chaf on page 164. The Shir today is being learned to Nishmas Rabbi ben Yamin ben Menashe Koltman. Wegen dem Zior von der Gewiim von der Menorah sagen Chazal regarding the shape of the goblets that there was in the Menorah. Chazal tell us as follows: Lama hein doimen. What would they compare to? Kimin koises Alexandrium. They are like these Alexandrian goblets. Is the Rambam mefarish bepirish hamishnayis shaloi? The Rambam explains in his pirish hamishnayis. What does this mean? As the smenta kois was shulayim shaloi tzorim. This is a kois that the bottom is narrow, their deck is small. The bottom is narrow. And as I paskin the Rambam la'alocha b'sefer ayad. This is what the Rambam paskins as well in his sefer of halacha, sefer ayad. Hagviyim doimim l'koises Alexandria. The goblets were similar to these Alexandrian goblets. Shepi and Rochov, the opening is wide, Vishulei and Kotzer, and the bottom is narrow. Gefindt man in them adova tumua. We find something that's very unusual about the way these goblets were shaped into the gold menorah. Es ist voran der Zier von der Menorah, was der Rambam hat mitzai gewesen mit Guf Ksad Yad Kotsche. There is the actual picture of the menorah that the Rambam himself drew. The Pirish HaMishnayis Shaloi, and the Rambam drew this in the Pirish HaMishnayis. In the end of the Sikha, you have the actual picture that the Rambam drew, and that, as the Rabbi brings later in Ha'ara 11 star, the Rambam also drew a picture of this in the Sefer Ayad. And when you look there at the picture, you see on dort is a Mitzayah de Gviyim in a Fakerten Neufen. And there, the picture of the goblets that the Rambam drew are all upside down. Dem breiten Chelek HaGviyah, Pien, zum Unten von der Menorah. The wider part of the goblet is at the bottom of the menorah. On the schmalen Teile, and the narrower side that is, Shuleim, which is the bottom, Oiden, that's on the top. Das heißt, what this means is, Atzir von an ibegekerten Kais, Shalach Alexandria. The Rambam draws the picture of the cups or the goblets in the menorah to be upside down. This is very interesting. Why would the Rambam draw the picture showing that the menorah had the shape of these goblets upside down? Even though the Rambam himself there says regarding the picture that he drew, as mit dem Zier willen beweisen klolusa ha'echaisa, he's just giving you a general idea about what the menorah looked like. Yidias minyan agviyim chulu, the number of the goblets and mekamaisam, and where they are positioned in the menorah. Aber nit sheteda mimenu tavnis ha'geviyah bediktuk. But it's not giving you the very precise size of everything, mamish exact. So the Rambam himself says that you can't be very precise regarding his picture. So maybe we could say regarding the fact that the goblets are drawn here upside down is also not exact. Therefore, regarding these goblets as well, when you look at the picture, you see that not only is it narrow at the bottom, it's actually drawn as a triangle. Obviously, it's impossible to say that these Alexandrian goblets were completely pointy at the bottom. You can't make the bottom of a goblet completely pointy, because you can't have the cup standing up in an upright position. They were narrower at the bottom. In contrast to the wider opening at the top. So that detail is clearly not precise, the fact that it's totally pointy at the bottom. But over here though, regarding this detail, that the Rambam draws the goblets upside down, is es aber nit kein Tam zu Mitzayah sein verkehrt. The fact that the Rambam says you can't take precise measurements and precise everything in the details of it, doesn't mean that the Rambam would therefore draw the goblets upside down. Shulayim l'mayla and the oibim l'mata. With them kapar up, that the head, the opening of the becher should be turned up on its head. Why would the Rambam draw it this way? Obefrat, as the Rambam is given a daikin b'chol inyan or b'chol prat. It's known that the Rambam was very precise regarding every matter, regarding every detail. Legt sich klar nicht zu sagen. So therefore, that doesn't make sense to say, as the Rambam soll mit Zai sein, die Gviyim beäufen hoffach, und bei jedem Gviyah 22 Mal. It doesn't make sense that the Rambam would draw these goblets upside down 22 times, and each time that he draws it upside down, it was just by chance, or he wasn't precise about this, even though the menorah had the goblets the other way, right side up. Therefore, the Rebbe says, it seems that we have to say, as it would simply be, as the Rambam hat mitzay gewend the Gviyim boifen zeh, that the Rambam drew the shape of the goblets in the menorah in this form, upside down. Validaitoi is azay gewend zeh kviis b'menorah. Because in the Rambam's opinion, this is exactly how they were shaped in the menorah. Other mitzad Kabbalah from Melamed to Melamed Midoleder, whether the Rambam knew this by a tradition from one teacher to the next, from one generation to the next, that this was handed down, that this is the way it was in the menorah. Or the Rambam found a source for this in Medrash that has not reached us. As we find in other places in the Rambam, und andere Rishonim, and similar in other Rishonim as well, in Yonim v'zeh mokid is a medrash v'chayetze b'zeh shalegia liyadenu, where they quote and say certain things, and their source is in a medrash that hasn't reached us. So similar regarding this, the Rambam draws the goblets upside down. He must have had a source that this is the way it actually was in the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash. Und bringt es nicht b'sefer hayad. The Rambam does not quote this detail that it was upside down in the Sefer Hayad, where he writes the actual halacha l'maisa of how to build the menorah. Punkt wie bringt nicht besifroi the tziyurim shebepirish hamishnai shaloi. Just like the Rambam does not draw any of the pictures that he did draw when he wrote his pirish on Mishnayis, but in the Sefer Hayad he did not draw these pictures. Avapi was b'meile zerenoich da besifrei kame proten velechem zetten sir. Even though by not drawing these pictures, there are certain details that you could only see in a picture, which are missing in the Sefer Hayad. But the Rambam did not bring this in the Sefer Hayad. Now the Rebbe here will give 3 reasons for this. But before we go further, it's very important to mention here that in the Ha'ara 11 star, the Rebbe says that later on it was publicized that the Rambam actually did make a picture for the menorah, not only in the Pirush HaMishnayis, but also in the Rambam. And there you see the exact same thing, that the Rambam drew the picture similar to the picture of Pirush HaMishnayis, where you can see that the top of the goblets are at the bottom. It's upside down. But here, continuing in what the Rebbe says in the Sikha, if the Rambam does not bring this picture, or maybe perhaps what the Rebbe says here could be relevant to other pictures that the Rambam draws in Pirush HaMishnayis and does not bring them in the Rambam, we can give a few reasons for this. And from those reasons are as follows. Aleph, number 1, Milachat Chile is das Siyurim nit gewenen sein Tochnis von Sifrei Mishnah Torah. From the beginning, in the plan of how the Rambam is going to put forward the halachis in Sefer Hayad, pictures wasn't part of it. So it's just not part of how he's sharing the information. So therefore, even though you are going to have to miss certain details by not having pictures, but that's not how the Rambam set up and designed his Sefer. Beis, another point there is, Alpia Yedua, it's known, Oivifel the Rambam is memayet betachlis, brengen besifrei, zachen, welches nit mefurish b'shas v'chayetze bezeh. The Rambam was very much stayed away from trying to bring ideas that are not clearly stated in the Gemara. The Rambam brought certain chidushim that he said, and that the Rambam writes yireli and so on, but it's very minimal. The Rambam more or less quotes the halachas, the way they appear in Gemara, and he just gathered them and put them in an organized fashion. So therefore, the picture here, which says certain details which are not clear in the Gemara, the Rambam did not include that. Gimel, some of these details that we're speaking about that you can see in a picture, in the Rambam's opinion, these are not something that must be this way, and therefore, by drawing a picture, and you're giving it in the picture, you see certain details that you may think that it has to be exactly the way it is in the picture, but some of those details that you see in a picture, when you draw a picture, you have to draw it to the T, exactly what the picture is, then you may think that it's all the Yekuva, that it all must be exactly this way, so therefore the Rambam doesn't bring these pictures. There could be other reasons as well why the Rambam did not bring pictures in his Sefer Hayad the way he does in Pirush HaMishnayis. There's a lot to be said about this topic here regarding the source of the Rambam, from where he took the fact that the goblets were upside down, and regarding the fact that the Rambam, the way he shares things in the Sefer Hayad without pictures. Ben Kamakaima, here's not the place to expound further on this subject. Okay, so this is the explanation for why the Rambam draws it upside down, because in the Rambam's opinion, the goblets in the Menorah actually were upside down. What was explained here, this only answers and explains is Mevayer, the Rambam, why the Rambam draws it this way. This is the fact of the way it was. But now the question comes up, why is this so? Why were the goblets in the Menorah shaped in the Menorah upside down? Especially that we find in the Mishkan itself, when it comes to the walls of the Mishkan, which were made out of the Atzi Shittim, the wooden walls, and how did they form the walls? It was stood up the way they grow. It wasn't laid down like the way you would think beams are laid down one on top of the other, but they were stood up. Dafke, specifically the way they grow. Hatachten lamata, what was at the bottom when it grew is at the bottom. Va'elyan lamayla, what's at the top was at the top. And the full lernt menah baklal. And from this we learn now that this is a rule regarding all mitzvahs. As kola mitzvahs kulon, ein adam yetze ben ela derech gedilosan. When it comes to all mitzvahs, you're not yetze in fulfilling the mitzvah unless you have it in your hands, you're holding it the way it grows. As the Rabbi will bring later in the Sikha, this applies to the mitzvah of Daled Minim by the lulav. If you hold the lulav or the esrog upside down, you're not yet to the mitzvah. So if so, the question on the goblets in the Menorah is, why should the bechers, the goblets in the Menorah, be upside down, the opposite of the way they sort of grow, their natural way of the way you use them, when you place them on the table, right side up? So we can answer, as das wird sein move on, this is understood, leitem, was me gefind, bin eged, dem klolis in yin Menorah, an ähnliche, an inyan welche, is me en vedugmas hanal. We find, regarding the Menorah, something which is similar to what we're seeing here regarding the Menorah having the goblets upside down. What does it say regarding the Menorah? Regarding the light that comes from the candles burning on the Menorah, the Gemara tells us, Hashem says, it's not I that need light here in the Beis HaMikdash. Rather, what's the point of lighting the Menorah? This is testimony for all people of the world, that the Shechina dwells amongst Yidden. Which means as follows: the Oyer HaMenorah is nicht gewähnt, kedei zu beleuchten dem Ort, wo man sie gestellt, Mishkan und Mikdash. The light of the Menorah is not here to illuminate the area of where it was positioned, which is inside the Beis HaMikdash and Mishkan or the Mikdash. V'adarabe, on the contrary, dort is eine tzarech l'oira. There in the Beis HaMikdash itself, there's no need for this light. Nor is gewähnt an edus l'chol boi olam. This is testimony for all people in the world, that they should see that there's the light in the Menorah, and there's the Menorah Maravi, the western light of the Menorah, which burnt and never extinguished, and this is testimony for the dwelling of the Shechina amongst the Yidden. That's the point of the Menorah. So the point of what Chazal is saying here is not only to say that physical light was not needed in the Beis HaMikdash, it was just spiritual light, and therefore this is testimony for all of the world. The point here is, even as far as the spiritual light of the Menorah is concerned, is not for the purpose of Ani, for the Beis HaMikdash itself. The spiritual light of the Menorah showing, demonstrating, and affecting and influencing the entire world to see the Shechina which dwells amongst Yidden. And it was for this reason, the windows in the Beis HaMikdash were built different and the opposite way than the way windows are usually built. Or shkufim atumim, which means shkufim mibachutz va'atumim mibifnim. The Rebbe translates in Yiddish, breiter and dreisen und schmaler innewenig, which means that it was wider on the outside and narrower on the inside. The opposite of the way the windows were designed usually in those times. And as the commentaries, Rashi and others explain there, that the reason for this is as follows. A Fenster wird gebaut sei, a window is built and shaped in such a way as the Fensteröffnung is innewenig breiter wie in dreisen. That the opening of the window is broader or is wider on the inside and it's narrower on the outside. What does that accomplish? Kedei die Lichtigkeit von draußen sollen sich mispashet sein euch in die Tzaddim von der Cheder. So that the light that comes in, the sunlight that comes from outside, should spread out through the wider opening that there is on the inside to all corners of the room. That's the way windows were built in houses or buildings usually. Aber die Chaleines from Beis HaMikdash sind gewesen verkehrt. However, the way the windows of the Beis HaMikdash were shaped was in the opposite. They were narrow on the inside, and it broadened when it going further out, so that the light should emanate from the Heichal of the Beis HaMikdash to illuminate the entire world. Well, the tafkid from Eira Menorah is, and this is connected to the point regarding what Chazal say before regarding the Menorah, the whole point of the light of the Menorah is it's testimony for all people in the world. So we see here that the point of the light of the Menorah is not for itself, not in the place where the Menorah is, rather it's the influence that the light of the Menorah gives to the entire world. So based on this, we can understand the same when it comes to the goblets in the Menorah. Similar, we could explain regarding the goblets in the Menorah as follows. What are these goblets here to symbolize? The Bechaya is Mevaya. Rabbeinu Bechaya explains the Remez and the Gviyim from the Menorah. What is the hint with the shape of the goblets that were on the golden Menorah? A Gviya is a Keli sheyesh lebeis kibbul. A goblet is a vessel that has an interior, and you place any kind of liquid in it, any beverage in it, and then you drink from it, and it quenches your thirst. Und das ist a remez of the galgalim shehem mekablim koiches al yonim. This hints to the galaxies that there are, the constellations and the galaxies that there are in the spiritual worlds, that receive spiritual powers, umashpiyim koyach ba'olam hashafal, and they then give and share the flow of this spiritual powers into our lower world here. That's what these goblets in the Menorah resemble. What the Adgosh in them is, so looking here into the words of Rabbeinu Bechaya, what's being highlighted here is the ashpa, me'elyon la'ashafal. The fact that there's a flow that's coming through from a higher world, from a spiritual world, down here into the physical world. Mashke umerave. It gives to drink and to quench the thirst of someone that needs. Der Ikke, tafkid von a kais. What is the main function of a goblet, of a cup, of a becher? Besteht nitten in sein a klikibel. Does not consist of the fact that it's there to hold and contain in it and just remain inside without being used. Das ist der Tafkid von a chavis, the chayetze bezeh. That is the function of a barrel that's made to store and contain in it. Where you store water or wine or any other beverage. But a goblet or a cup which is used to drink from is a keli, durch welche die Mayen v'chulu von der chavis, oder Mayen v'chayetze bezeh, kommt on und is mashke merave the modem asheise. A cup is when a person actually wants to now drink from this water or wine, and you pour from the barrel into a cup, or from a spring, and you take it into a cup, and then you're able to drink from it. So the whole point is not to contain and leave it stored inside the cup, but rather to take from it and drink from it. So therefore it comes out as follows. After this explanation that Rabbeinu Bechaya says regarding what the goblets in the Menorah symbolizes is Masem mit Maimer Azal Anal. This goes along with what Chazal tell us wegen Klalis Inyan HaMenorah, regarding what the Menorah in general was there for in the Beis HaMikdash. As the Chazal say, and here the Rebbe emphasizes the details, Loi Loira Ani Tzarech. The light of the Menorah, including the Menorah, the spiritual power and light of the Menorah, it's not for Ani Tzarech. It's not a spirituality that's in a level contained to Ani, contained to the space where it is in the Beis HaMikdash. Nor Eidesu L'chol Ba'aylam Chulu. Rather, it's a testimony that it goes out into the entire world. As the tafkid von Eira Menorah is, the function of the light of the Menorah was nitinem Ani Tzarech, kibul, not to receive and contain and to bring holiness in the place where it was, nor kedei zu beleuchten die Welt schon mibachutz, rather to illuminate the entire world on the outside, or b'lashon Bechaya, and again to quote the expression that Rabbeinu Bechaya says, zu mashpia sein, to give and to influence ba'olam hashafel, in the low world. That's what the menorah is all about. So the cups, the goblets in the menorah, which is about taking out and sharing and giving to drink to someone that is in need, is exactly what this is symbolizing. The hashpah, the giving, the influencing to a lower place. So now, according to this, we come back and we can understand why the Rambam tells us that the goblets of the menorah were all upside down. So with this we now understand why the goblets in the menorah and in an anayfim from PM lamato shaleim lamayla. The opening was at the bottom and the bottom is at the top. When the gviyim sind in Zeit weilig zu lieb dem Kibbel, when you're using a cup, a goblet, and temporarily it's sitting on the table and it contains and it holds the beverage inside of it. B'shas, in the kiddush alakais, when a person is picking up the cup and he's saying the kiddush on the cup, so while you're saying kiddush, you're obviously holding it right side up. Is there matzev piyan lamayla v'sholei lamata? So you're holding it right side up. Was demult halten zei oif in zich mashke, and then it contains within it the liquid or the wine that's in it. But that's only temporarily. That's not the real function of the cup or the goblet. What is the symbolism of the beches, of the goblets in the menorah, to give, to influence, that to be able to, one could drink from it and quench his thirst? Is adarabah. So here, the real function of what the goblet is about is the way it should be positioned. The matzav zeire lehepech. So the position that the goblets are in should be the opposite, the other way around. Piv lemata v'shulav lemayla, where the opening is at the bottom and the bottom is up. Like when you drink, you turn it and you should drink from it until when you get the full hashpah of it, then you can finish drinking and it's upside down. And therefore it's the same over here regarding the menorah. Since the light of the menorah has to reach and influence all those places and levels which are very low and far down spiritually from the mikdash and very far from the Beis HaMikdash. Or the B'lashon Abchaya now, to use the expression Rabbeinu B'chaya says, Umashpiyim ba'olam hashafal, that the influence of the galaxies which the menorah represents is the hashpah that comes to a very low world. The Rebbe, so therefore, is matzav agviyim shebemenorah. The position of the goblets in the menorah is pm lamata v'shaleim lamayla. In the menorah, the symbolism there is specifically that it's upside down. Al derech v'dechalonis hamikdash, similar to the way the windows in the Beis HaMikdash were shaped. Zen shkufim atumim heipech v'chalonis habayis, and that they were narrower on the inside, broader on the outside, the opposite of the way they are usually in homes that were built in those times. And therefore the light emanates from the Beis HaMikdash to the entire world. That explains the reason for what the Rambam says, that the shape of the goblets and the menorah of the Beis HaMikdash were upside down. After this, the Rebbe here will explain what we take from this in our Avodas Hashem, when one is there to influence someone else, how we have to influence another person based on the way the menorah was positioned in the Beis HaMikdash. Based on this, we could also explain in one's service of Hashem, serving Hashem, and as I mentioned, to influence other people in that regard. The mremez, the limud, the hint, and the lesson was the gviyim and given dafke piin rachav v'shalei kotzer. What we could learn from the fact that the menorah had, first of all, before we get to the fact that it was upside down, first the fact that we're talking over here about cups that are narrower at the bottom and wide at the opening. What can we learn from this when it comes to hashpah influencing others? Since the goblets of the menorah are hinting to this, that you're giving to drink and are influencing someone else, is muvan as da fadetzich ape rochov. So it's understood that what's demanded in this is that it should be done in a manner of an open and wide, broad mouth. Wide opening. And es kommt zum Spiel sein, auf a zweiten Jiden, when it comes to being involved on influencing another Yid, or the Bechlalis Yeiser, or more generally speaking, zu vernehmen sich mit der Aveide, von Lasses Leis Barach dir betachteinem, when one is occupied with the work in this world, to make this world into a place which is a dwelling for Hashem, which is the idea of Eidos Hu, L'chol Ba Yolam, the Lashon of the Gemara, the fact that the menorah is a testimony for Hashem's dwelling in this world, for all the world to see. darf das getan werden mit der größten Rachfus. This has to be done in the broadest manner. Biz lamaila mimedida v'agbala, higher than any limitation. If it's to be truly broad, then that's broadness without any limitation. So therefore, dafür mekabel sein. So even if the cup is positioned right side up and the opening is on the top, but still the opening has to be very broad. For what reason? Dafür mekabel sein, sich annehmen mit die größte Keuches. One has to gather within himself, and he has to strengthen himself with the greatest energy possible. Which means piv durch as makabel letoichai is rachav. The opening of the cup, when it's positioned right side up and you're taking in, has to be with the greatest broadness to dedicate yourself and strengthen yourself with the greatest energies possible for this work to influence someone else or to share with someone else in the world. That's the symbolism in Pe Rachav, in the shape of the goblets of the menorah, even when it's right side up. If when this person is focusing on himself, his own Aveda for himself, and he may, regarding his own connection to Hashem, be just at a beginning in his Avedas Hashem, or even if he's already further on progressed in his connection to Hashem, but regarding his own Aveda with himself, for whatever reason, he serves Hashem and his connection is in a limited fashion, is ein matziv piv l'maylo. So then what's his condition? It's like the cup that's right side up, but it's just a piv. There's an opening, there's a connection, but it's not a per rochav. It's not a broad opening. Over there, in his limited own Aveda, there can be an opening which is limited. However, when it comes to the work that one does to influence another Yid, or befrat, and more specifically to the Aveda von machen die Welt v'radirelo yisbarach, to bring this to the entire world, to turn the entire world into a dira for Hashem, muss man wissen, as da muss sein l'mayla magbolis. That here, the approach in influencing another and bringing the truth of Hashem to the entire world should be done in a fashion where it's without any limitations. Don't look at the condition that you're personally in, if you're still limited and a beginner in your Avedis Hashem. When it comes to serve others and share and bring it to the entire world, there you have to go with the total broadness without any limitations. So that the rachav, so then you take that broad opening that there is when the cup was right side up, and you strengthened yourself for the purpose of this Aveda to share with others. So the Aveda, the rachav, the rachvos, in the opening of this cup still begins, as the Rebbe said earlier, even when the cup is already right side up, still right side up that is, and you're preparing and you're dedicating yourself to this Aveda to share with others, so you have then this broad opening at the top, and then you can use that special keiches that you strengthen yourself with and you're dedicating yourself to, then it becomes rachav klape hamakabel mimeno hamata. Then you take that broad opening and you turn it over as it was in the menorah, and you're able to share in a very broad manner. The concept that we're explaining here regarding the way one should influence others with that wide and broad attitude is similar to what was explained once at length in a different place regarding another thing that we have in the Mishkan. There were various different donations in the Mishkan. There were the donations where all Yidden brought the same amount of a half a shekel that were then used. The silver half shekel was used to create the sockets where the krushim, the walls of the menorah were placed, of the Beis HaMikdash that is, or the Mishkan, were placed into. And then there was also the Terumah Hashkalim, the half Hashkalim that were used, that they bought that is, the Karbanis format. On Trumas HaMishkan. Then there were the donations of all materials needed for the Mishkan. And there's a difference between them. Trumas HaAdona VaHashkalim is given by Gerenetz to Adova Mesuyim Kesef or Machtas HaShekel. The donations that were used for the sockets or the shkalim that were used for the karbanis were limited, and it was specifically silver, and it had to be a specific amount, a half a shekel. By contrast, when it comes to the donations for the Mishkan in general, they donated from all kinds of materials, which includes all different categories in creation. Daimim, the inanimate, tzemeach, from things that grow, onchai, and from the animals, and ubetzirif ish, yidvenu liboy, including the person himself, which dedicates and gives with feeling, with his heart, with the generosity of his heart, medaber, the human being that's here involved in this donation. So this includes and donates and includes everything, every category of the entire world. So what's the difference in these two different kinds of donations? Terumah donen was golem zene merames auf da nochas donen was cholas avede von Ayiden. The donations that there were, and the Rebbe focuses specifically on the sockets, they were used as a foundation, to place as a foundation below the walls of the Mishkan, which symbolizes the level of the beginning, the foundation where it begins in serving Hashem. This refers to the basic and consistent Aveda of a Yid every day, Aveda Musaderes, a organized and basic Aveda on a daily basis, unebendig from Maidani, which begins from when you wake up in the morning and you say Maidani, Ungain, Midarga Aleph, Lishnia, V'chulu, going from one level to the next, saying brachas, and then davening, and going on from there to learn, to go to work, and bringing the Eibishter into your life more and more throughout the day. So this is a gradual kind of Aveda which has a certain setup and a certain limitation to it. And therefore, that's symbolized in the fact that the donation was also very specific and limited. On the other hand, all the donations that were brought from all the materials that were needed for the Mishkan is merames of the klolos aveda von lasas lemikdash v'shachanti b'seichem. This includes and this represents the general aveda of a Yid to build a mikdash and to bring the Shekhinah to dwell here in this world. Dira b'tachteinim, a dwelling place for Hashem in this low world. Was in them is an itoken akbalas. In this, there's no limitations. Zinem tarum kol inyanei olam. This is something where a person has to go out and include every aspect, every area in the world to elevate it all to the Eibishter, and therefore, this is similar to what we have here regarding the goblets of the Menorah, which are PM Rachav. It's with a wide and broad opening to go into the world with a very, very big breitkeit, with a shturim, without any limitations. That's one point that we could learn out in the attitude that a Yid has in his influence in the world from the shape of the Menorah, of the goblets of the Menorah, that is, where it's narrow at the bottom and broad at the opening. Now here, the Rebbe takes another lesson from this in our attitude, in our Aveda, in creating the Dira B'Tachteinim in this world and sharing and influencing others. And thus is the Remez in them, and here we have also the hint, or the symbolism of this, was Afapi, as kol ha-mitzvahs, daf meton derech gedilosan dafke. Even though all mitzvahs must be done by holding it in your hand in the way it grows, specifically, wie es wird gebracht legabe and abgelernt von lulav and minav, as it's brought and it's learned out from the mitzvah of lulav and the other minim, the dal minim, it has to be held the right side up. Afa pikein zene di gvim shebim ha-menorah heipech derech gedilosan. Nevertheless, the goblets in the Menorah were shaped the opposite of the way they are usually positioned when you put it on the table, right side up. What's the reason for this? Yede mitzvah, every mitzvah you fulfill, ubefrat lulav v'minov, and especially the mitzvah of lulav and the other minim, zene medugmas gans seder ishtalshalos. They resemble and represent the organized levels of the worlds that there are, the spiritual worlds. By bringing down a hashpah into the world through these mitzvahs, there's a certain order of what's higher and what's lower, and this is what the kind of flow of godliness you bring out, down into the world in that order. So therefore, generally speaking, the mitzvah has to have a certain order and a certain level of what evolves from what, the way it grows, so to speak. Und der Fahr is the Seder Akim von Mitzvah in an Eufen von Derech Gedilosan. So the same has to be symbolized in the fulfillment of the mitzvah, that it's fulfilled by holding the item of the mitzvah the right side up. Oich de Gviyam Atzmam. Now coming back here to the goblets in the Menorah. So these goblets themselves, if you look at the goblets for themselves, Zene Shuleim Kotzer Upiem Rachav. The bottom is narrow, and it's the opening which is wide. When it's in the golden Menorah, and this was the Menorah was all miksha, was made one piece of gold. It was made as a sculpture, one piece of gold, and had the shapes of the Menorah in it. Und Zeir in the Menorah is mashke maravel shafal. And here, the point of these goblets in the Menorah is to show the fact that it gives to drink and it shears and it influences to one that's low, meir zayin b'chutz, to shine to someone that's on the outside. Is es verbunden mit Mishana Zayin Tivayur Gilusai. How should someone go about doing this kind of Aveda? To share and give to others. This is connected with and this demands of a person to be ready to change his nature, to change his habit. At the von sich, one has to be ready to leave his own self and what he's involved in for himself, leave his box, leave his place, and share and give to others that are on a much lower level than him. Ubemele zane de chalenis beisai, and an eifim from shkufim atumim, and therefore this is in the windows that are the opposite than usual, and they're narrow on the inside and broad on the outside. Und the gviim also, pm lamata v'sholeim lamayla heipech derech gedilasan, the fact that they're the opposite of the way they usually grow, the way they are usually positioned on the table. So this symbolizes the idea that being able to have the right attitude to share with someone else, it's going to demand of you to go out of yourself, to go out of your world, to be able to share with someone else. Und seine Aveda v'ashpah lemata is von apeh rochav, and as mentioned before, you influence and share with others in a broad manner, lamayla mimedila v'agbala, higher and beyond any level of any limitations. From here going forward in the Sikha, the Rebbe will address another detail that you see in the picture that the Rambam made of the Menorah. Es ist voran noch a prat in dem Zier Anal von dem Menorah shebeguf ksav yad Rambam. There's another detail we see here in the picture that the Rambam made of the Menorah. Was ist anders von the Tziyurim Regilim shel ha-Menorah, which is different than the regular pictures that we see many times that people make of the Menorah. And what is the difference? As the Sheishes Knei Menorah ziehen sich herauf von dem Kone ha-Memtzoi in a gleichen Alaxen, that the Menorah, so the sections of the Menorah, the sticks of the Menorah, what should I call them? The parts of the Menorah that come out, they go up in a straight diagonal manner. Nit v'in the tziyurei ha-Menorah ha-Regilim, not like many usual pictures that you have, at least in those times before the Rebbe spoke about this here in the Sikha, and even today you still see them. As it seems zacharoif v'chatzoi keshes, that the parts of the Menorah, all the branches that is of the Menorah, come out in a half bow or half circle. But in the Rambam's picture, take a look at the picture on page 172, you see clearly that they're straight in a diagonal manner, not half circle. Now, even though regarding this detail, maybe a very big squeeze, but you can maybe argue and say, as the Rambam the Rambam drew the picture straight and not half circles because it's just easier to draw a straight line than to make half circles. But the son of the Rambam, Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam, writes very clearly about this in his Pirush on the Torah, as the Sheishes Konim, the 6 branches of the Menorah, Nimshachim migufa shel Menorah litzad roisha, they come from the body of the Menorah and they come out to the top of the Menorah biyoshe, straight, as my father made a picture of this. Loi be'igul, and he says very clearly, not in a half circle, as others made a picture of this. This is the Rambam, so it's clear that this is the opinion of the Rambam. Rashi al says the same as the shisha konim ba'alaksoim nimshachim va'elim, that it goes up diagonally, and diagonally means not half a circles, but diagonally, like the Rambam made it. So from this it comes out as the tziyurim or regilim shel ha-Menorah, those common pictures that you see that people make of the Menorah, zene nit wie das Rashi und nit wie der Rambam hat sie mit Zai given. Pictures of the Menorah with half a circle, the branches of half a circle, are not according to Rashi and not according to the Rambam. So the Rebbe addresses this further. We do find sources in Sfarim for the opinion that says that it was half a circle. Not in any of the Rishonim in very early on, but we find this by the early Achrayim that do make the picture with half the circles. And these are very, very good sources for this. The Baal Mishnas Chassidim, the Sifrei Maisa Choshev, so in his Sefer Maisa Choshev al Melechas HaMishkan, schreibt the Pashtus, so he simply says, as the Shisha Konim zene gewen nimshachin be'igel, that the 6 branches of the Menorah came up from the body of the Menorah to the top in a half a circle. So he clearly says in half a circle. And that is mevayer as afapi as from Pirush Rashi is muchach as lehoyu be'igel, and he himself clarifies, even though from Rashi it seems like it was not a half a circle. Aval Rambam b'chiburoi lohiske teves alaksin. The Rambam in Sefer Hayad does not mention that it was diagonal, as Rashi writes. The Rambam just says that the branches come from the body of the Menorah up to the top of where they end, at the top of the Menorah. And therefore we can say that according to the Rambam, it was a half a circle. Und bringt was the Baal Chochmas HaMishkan schreibt, and then he quotes what the Baal Chochmas HaMishkan writes, as from them is Nire And it would seem from this, that the branches came up almost as a half a circle. On the Ma'aseh Choshev is Messiah. Going back to the Ma'aseh Choshev from the Baal Mishnah's Chassidim, he concludes and says, "V'hachi mistavra," that it appears to him, he just says this logically, not with any source, that this is the way it was. Why? The Bahachi hein daimim legalgali arikia, because if they're in a half a circle, it's similar to the galaxies that there are in heaven. Shekenegdam heim hashivaneidas, and the seven branches of the menorah correspond to the seven galaxies that there are, which are round. This is what he says, Misvara. Which is interesting that Rabbi here in Auto 40 points out that there are only 6 branches that are in half a circle. The one in the center is definitely straight. So it doesn't even fit with the symbolism that he says regarding the 7 galaxies in heaven. This is what it says in these Sfarim. Aber lefi ani is daite. However, the Rebbe says, in my humble opinion, Vibalt der Ma'aseh Choshev schreibt beferish. Since the Mechaber of the Ma'aseh Choshev clearly writes, as an Yisoid zu lernen, that what was his basis to say and to understand this, as Nimshachem be'igel, that the branches of the menorah come up as a half a circle. It's from Stimus Lashon Rambam b'chibura lehiske tevis alaksen. It's from the fact that the Rambam does not mention the word that Rashi says that it was diagonal. But the fun is nire shehoyo elim kamat be'igel, and from this it appears to say that they came up as a half a circle. And then he says in hachi mistavr, then he just says on his own a idea of his own because of the symbolism of this. Is aber nachdem, wie es ist nisgal geworden, guf savyat kodesh Rambam b'tzira menorah, after it was revealed to us the picture of the menorah that the Rambam himself drew, and he drew it twice, once in Pirush HaMishnayos and again in the Sefer Hayad. Ve'edusah shel ben Rambam b'zeh, and the testimony of the son of the Rambam himself about this, ubad goshe, and he emphasizes this very much, as das was Aviv hat Mitzay given b'Yoshe, is mit an eisdrückliche Kavana. The fact that his father drew the branches of the menorah straight was very intentional. Dafke azoi on loy beigel chulu, that it's straight and not a half a circle. Is batla yisoid or batla binyan. The whole basis of his conclusion is nullified. So the whole building or the whole idea that he builds based on this, that it was a half a circle, and with the idea that he comes up with and a symbolism that he comes up with, is all gone. And asking forgiveness from the honor of Torah, that he says differently, and the Rebbe says, in my humble opinion, it seems to be very clear as Oiv the Ma'aseh Choshev or Baal Chochmas HaMishkan wollten gesehen dem Zier der Rambam, if they would have seen the picture that the Rambam himself drew, on the Pirush from Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam, if they would have seen what Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam wrote about the picture of his father, wollten euch sehr geschrieben, as es nicht doch kein Plukte bezeh, they themselves would have said that there's no argument about this. Ulukula almas and the economy given b'yoshe. And everybody agrees that the branches of the menorah were straight. Now this idea that they didn't see certain things and therefore we now know that they themselves would retract from their opinion is al derech vid Alter Rebbe shreit b'Shulchan Aruch shaloi. Similar to what Alter Rebbe writes in Shulchan Aruch when he writes there about certain details in Mechiras Chametz, where the Alter Rebbe instituted certain things that the Poskim before didn't know of what the Rishonim wrote. As harbe misfarim Rishonim zal lo yotzel oirat tfus adayim b'imei achreinim zal, that many of the Sfarim of the Rishonim were not available to the big Poskim that paskined about this halacha. And therefore, regarding certain details, you can't rely on what they write because they didn't see what the Rishonim said. So here as well, you can't rely on their conclusion if they didn't see what the Rambam himself drew regarding the shape of the branches of the menorah, and they're basing their entire opinion on the fact that the Rambam does not write the word alaksain as Rashi when the Rambam himself draws the branches of the menorah to be straight. And if and since what's being said here is true, it would be the right thing to bring back and place back the crown to its place, meaning to bring back things the way they should be. As the from the menorah, all those that are making pictures of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, to learn wie es gewend der Eisen von the menorah shebemishkan and mikdash, to demonstrate, to teach how the menorah in the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash looked like. They should make the picture of the menorah ba'alaksen, diagonal, kedas Rashi, pshutishal mikra, following Rashi's opinion that explains the simple meaning of the pasuk, and v'harambam, and following what the Rambam's opinion is. And valpianal, based on what we said before, is yeshleiman as b'maskana ein chaylik b'dava. The conclusion regarding this matter is that there's no argument on this subject. Similar educational institutions, welche seine Mitzair of their Gilyonis, Blanken, the Tzir HaMenorah, they have in their paperwork or in their stationery, they have a picture of a Menorah, und sie zeichnen in die Knei Menorah wie Chatzoi Keshes, and they have the Menorah made in half a circle, is wie bald die Matare von der Tzir is, zu dienen als der Monung of the Menorah Shebe Mishkan Obe Mikdash, since the picture of this Menorah is here to symbolize and remind us of the Menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, is Kedai Ubi Yoser, as is all Mishane Zayin dem Tzir, und Mitzai Zayin die Konen Balaksen. It's very, very appropriate that they should change the picture, and the Menorah should be made with the branches that are made diagonally straight and not in half a circle. And in the Ha'ara that Rebbe adds, similar also regarding the Menorahs that are made to be used on Chanukah as well, that if you're going to make them as a standing Menorah similar to the ones in the Beis HaMikdash, it should be made with straight branches and not with the half a circle. Now, dabei kommt dazu noch ein Inyan. Regarding the subject, to be particular about this, to make the branches diagonal and not half a circle, there's another very important reason why we should be making the picture this way. Der Tzir HaRagel von der Menorah, the more common picture of the Menorah as the Sheishes HaKanim Zene V'Chatzoi Keshes, that the 6 branches of the Menorah are shaped in a half a circle, is al pi hashara an Nachmachung von der Tzir HaMenorah was nit jeden auf Metzai bereimi. The assumption here is that this is a copy of the shape of the Menorah that non-Jews made, which you have in Rome. And where in Rome? Of the Nitzachen Arke, dem Shar HaNitzachen von Titus Yemach Shemai. This is on the Arch of Titus that he built as a gateway of his victory when he came back after he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. And there he has a picture of a Menorah that the Romans carried and brought away from the Beis HaMikdash, and there the picture of that Menorah is made when it branches in a half a circle. When Titus HaRash hat Charur gemacht the Beis HaMikdash, when he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, hat geheißen, wegzunehmen die Klei HaMikdash und sie bringen kein Reim. He commanded that they should take away all the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash and to bring them to Rome. Und l'chveidoi von dem Rasha, and in honor of this wicked person, hat man him in Reim gebayit ashar nitzachin. They built for him in Rome a big gateway of victory, was trugt sein Namen, which carries his name, Shar Titus, the gateway of Titus. Of dem Shar Mitzai given, and then they made a picture over here on this gateway, the Mitrakt, the Gefangenen Klei HaMikdash, B'toichem de Menorah, how the Romans carried the different vessels of the Beis HaMikdash, and amongst them you see also the picture of the Menorah that they're carrying. On the Metzir from the Menorah, if in Shar Titus, then in the Sheishes HaKanim B'Chatzoi Keshes. And there, it's in that picture that you see that the Menorah has the shape of the round branches. That's seemingly the source of where it became known that the Menorah, the Beis HaMikdash, had these round branches. So now the Rebbe addresses this. Was neusuf of them, as the Tzir HaMenorah of Shar Titus is klal nit meduyik. In addition to the fact that you can't use this as a source for what the Menorah, the Beis HaMikdash, looked like, because that Menorah is not precise at all, and in the Ha'ara the Rebbe addresses the details that are not precise, is doch das getan geworden kumuvan. What was this picture made for on this arch of Titus? This was done as understood kedei zu areis bringen die Schlitte und Herrschaft von Reim über Yidden. This is being made to express the control and dominion that the Romans had over Yidden. God forbid. Bis es mal dort euch ausgekritzt bekamen es die Werte Judäa Kafta. They inscribed on this arch also the words Yehuda Yidden is gefangen, that the Jews were taken hostage. Und es eine gewähnt Zmanen, and there were such time periods, wenn wir vielleicht machriach sein Yidden zu kommen zu dem Schar, they would force Yidden to come here to this arch. Sie sollen sehen, was dort ist geschrieben und gezeichnet, they should see what was written and inscribed there. Bechdei zu den Niedrigen, v'chulu, in order to humiliate the Yidden. Komtais. So now that we know this, what's the source of the shape of the half circles of the branches of the Menorah? It comes out. As das Metzai sein, die Knei Menorah v'chatzoi keshes, drawing the picture of the Menorah with this shape of the half a circle, because it's in the Mitzvah of Shar Titus, as it is in the shape on the arch of Titus, this should bring out a tremendous pain that you should scream and cry about this. In addition, and this is the main point going back to what was mentioned before, but this is Heipech Rashi v'Harambam v'chulu. This is the opposite of Rashi and the Rambam's opinion, and as mentioned before, nobody argues about this. Euch, weil das gibt a gewissen Hesken v'chol. And additionally, this gives sort of a certain agreement and confirmation, God forbid, v'rachmana litzlan, to dem Zier of Nishar Titus, to this picture that there is on this Arch of Titus. Was ist gemacht geworden, kedei zu Mitzayir sein Yidden und sie niedrig machen, which is drawn and is there only to bring pain and to humiliate the Yidden. And you're giving a certain agreement and confirmation to this. Instead of the fact was Hatzir from the Menorah, that making a picture of the Menorah, darf the Mann and Menorah sein a Yidden, as ein Tafkid is to sein La'or Goyim. So this reminds a Yid what the Menorah is and its shape and what its function was, that it's there to be a light for all the nations of the world. A testimony for all people of the world that the Shekhinah dwells amongst the Yidden, the greatness of Yidden and the Shekhinah that dwells amongst them. Instead, you draw the Menorah like the shape of Shar Titus, which demonstrates and expresses the exact opposite. Where you see that the Romans were victorious over the Yidden. Hashem save us from this. So therefore, it's very important to not ever make the shape of the Menorah half a circle, but rather, according to the way all the opinions of the Rishonim are, that there should be straight branches, as the Rambam and Rashi write. Be the will of Hashem, as Bekar of Mamish, speedily in our times, the true and everlasting redemption should come. And we'll see the Menorah literally and fully. In the Beis Hamikdash Ashlishi, in the third Beis Hamikdash, and we'll see clearly how the Menorah looks, and it'll be exactly as the Rebbe says here in the Sikha, with the straight branches of the Menorah. Moshe and Aaron will come in the time of Tchias HaMesim, we'll see with our physical eyes, with our physical eyes, the fulfillment of the mitzvah, to kindle the Menorah, to send in the Menorah, kipshuta mamish, literally, ubimehera v'yameinu mamish.